All right, good morning, everybody, or where we were, good afternoon already. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Marilyn and Hi, for hosting our class this week. And this morning's class is Leilu Nishmat, a few people, Irit Bat Raya, Miriam Bat Sibik, Ishaya Ben Laura, and Esther Bat Sarah. Just one housekeeping thing, next week we won't be having class because next week is the Sephardic Bikur Cholim Bake Sale. We'll have two more classes after that on June 8th and June 15th. Then there'll be a little bit of a break until like camp gets underway, because I know everyone's very busy with that, myself included. And then we'll probably start a little bit of a different time because the summer schedule will be a little different. So stay tuned for that. We'll update everybody weekly on what's going to take place. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. We have a couple of new faces. So I'm gonna call on a student of mine. Hi, Norma. What's doing? Right away. Put her right on the spot. Welcome. Good to see you. How's everything? How was your semester going? Yes? Yes? You finished up? Everything's done? 1 year down. Very good. Good for you. You chose your major yet or anything like that? Yeah? What are you going to study? Marketing. Very good. Good for you. Well, welcome to the class. Everybody will bring you in. The reason why I wanted to start with that, there's always a reason why I start with something like that, is because I want to talk a little bit today about something powerful, very important idea that I think also connects to the holiday of Shavuot, but I think is something that's so important for us to practice in our lives, but it's a little challenging. And that is the idea of maybe acknowledging somebody new that appears in our circle, right? Norma, I'll put you on the spot again. What was maybe some of your emotions coming to the class as a new face, never been here before? What were you thinking? And it's okay to be totally honest.
Very excited to get Justin Bieber to
All right, so if you're in a good mood, then everything's good. Yeah, absolutely. I think we've all been in that moment. Oh, and she got a friend. There you go. Okay, beautiful. Estelle has been to a previous class before, though, so she's technically not totally new to this. Why I ask that is because I want you to imagine for a minute a situation in which you were new to something. You came into a new environment, a new setting, something that was not within your comfort zone. Maybe you attended a new exercise class, or you showed up at a brand new shul for the first time. Something like that. You just joined the school PTA and you're having your first meeting. You moved to a new place and you're having a get together. That feeling of being new to a certain environment comes with a lot of excitement, right? Sometimes a fresh start, something new, but also comes with a lot of feelings of anxiety, of nervousness. Will I be accepted by the people? Do I know how to behave? Do I know the customs and practices of this particular group? There's a certain, every group, whatever it is, whether it's a certain group of friends, whether it's how people do things in a certain place, has their own way, like their unwritten code of how people behave and what they say and what they do. And so when you're a new person, you're trying to, a lot of times people are just very shy. They don't want to say anything. They want to kind of just observe and learn the ropes from watching what everyone else does, because you don't want to do anything to embarrass yourself. You don't want to do anything to offend anybody. You don't want to do something that's going to cause people to look at you in a negative way. We know that first impressions are a lot for people. So you're coming into a new scene, you're coming into a new setting. There's a lot of reservations that a person has, a lot of nerves that are kicking in for somebody. Now think about going into that very same situation, but somebody acknowledges that you're there. Somebody breaks the ice, as they say, right? Introduces you, asks you how you're doing, says, come next to me. You're going to a new exercise class, a biking class. Why don't you take the bike next to me? You'll know, I'll show you how we do things, right? Imagine you're coming into a brand new setting where you have all of those nerves and all of those reservations, and somebody comes over to you and actively acknowledges that you're there, that you have a presence, and is willing to even maybe take you under their wing to kind of show you the ropes. What does that feel like? That's a really reassuring, very comfortable feeling. All of a sudden, your nerves are put at ease. One of the things that I learned being a young new rabbi to a new community was that very thing, that the moment you see a new face in shul, you have to go and approach that person. You have to come and see it. And it took me time to learn it, and I'm still not 100% at it. My personality is such that I'm comfortable with the people that I'm comfortable with and the people that I know. And it's always uncomfortable sometimes, or awkward, or you feel like to go over to somebody that you've never seen before, that you've never met before, or that you don't know their name, and to have a conversation with them. So it goes like both ways. Just like the person who's coming into a new environment has their nerves and reservations about something, the people who see somebody new come into their environment are always thinking, well, who is that person? Why are they here? What are they doing? What's their name? What's their story? Right? And oftentimes we don't want to acknowledge that person because, I don't know, maybe they're not going to fit in so well. Maybe we don't really want them to stay here. We have all of those thoughts. And so we just kind of, or maybe we just don't notice. We just kind of like go about our business. Someone popped into shul. All right, a lot of people pop into shul. We'll see you later. Right? You may not see that person again. Right? So we're always hesitant to acknowledge that person, to go over to them, to ask them who they are, to have that startup conversation. And maybe we feel awkward about it. But when those things happen, when somebody comes into a new situation and they're acknowledged by other people, or you acknowledge somebody else who comes into a new situation, that's how great things can happen. That's something that the Torah demands of us and asks of us. And that's really the true embodiment of a statement that's made in Pirkei Avot. The statement that's made in Pirkei Avot it's made by a rabbi, his name was Rabbi Eliezer. He says, Yehi kevod havercha, haviv alecha keshelach. That the honor of your fellow man, haver over here, sometimes we translate as friend, but friend doesn't have to be literally what we think of as a friend, someone I know, someone I'm comfortable with. Probably it doesn't mean that. It means a colleague, an acquaintance, somebody who is there, somebody who's part of our nation, part of our people. Let your fellow man's honor be as beloved to you as the honor that you would have for yourself. So just like any of us who went into a situation where things were brand new to us, right? A new student comes to school, you have all of that anxiety, would want to be acknowledged by the teacher, by the rabbi, by the head of the PTA, by the exercise teacher who's teaching the class. And when you get that acknowledgement, all of a sudden that those reservations kind of melt off a little bit. We would all want that. It's our job to also give that recognition to an acknowledgement to others when we see them in that situation. I want to read to you a beautiful quote that I saw from Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, and it's brought here in this very nice Pirkei Avot on this very Mishnah. It's written as part of a book he wrote called The Community, what it means to be a community. He says, to recognize a person is not just to identify him physically. It is more than that. It is an act of identifying them existentially, meaning that they exist, giving them a right to be there, as a person who has a job to do that only he can do properly. To recognize a person means to affirm that he is irreplaceable. To hurt a person means to tell them that he is expendable, that there is no need for him. The halakha equated the act of publicly embarrassing a person with murder. So the idea that we see somebody new come into our group and we bring them in and we acknowledge them and we see them as being important is to affirm that they have an existence, right? Is to basically give them their humanity, to say, you're an important person. You're here for a reason. A God created you, and you especially, because you have something that you offer that none of us can offer. And we want to tap into that and bring you in and see what you can contribute to the dynamic of our group. To recognize somebody is to say, you're irreplaceable. We need you. If we don't have you, we're going to be missing something, and we want you. And that is when people are acknowledged, and it's so simple. It's just simply saying, hi, I don't know, we've never met before. My name is such and such. What's your name, right? Or this is the first time I'm seeing you here. Where are you from? What it is. That casual conversation, it seems like almost nothing. It seems totally insignificant. But when that conversation finishes, what's going through that person's mind is, wow, somebody noticed me. I obviously am important. I obviously matter. I feel comfortable here. I'd like to come back again. I'd like to see these people again. This is the type of atmosphere that I would like to be in. People want to be in an atmosphere where they're welcomed, where they're appreciated, where they're acknowledged. Nobody wants to be in a situation where they're basically tossed aside and ignored, right? I want to go somewhere where I feel important, where I feel like I have a job to do, where I feel like I'm irreplaceable. On the flip side, when we don't acknowledge people, we sometimes think, okay, so we didn't acknowledge them, big deal. But sometimes to not acknowledge somebody is also to hurt them, right? A person comes to the shul 2-3 times and nobody says hello to them. That's not just, oh, people didn't notice me. They're not being friendly. They don't, obviously I'm not important. Obviously they don't want me here, right? They're pushing me out. Maybe that's their way of subtly telling me, you don't belong here. Why don't you go somewhere else? That's not just a parv statement. That's a negative statement. That's harming somebody. And that's telling somebody that they're not important. In a certain way, if we extended it, he's saying that that's akin to murdering that person, right? Embarrassing that person and saying, you don't have an existence to us. In our eyes, you don't belong here, and pushing that person out. And that's not a message that any of us should be saying to anybody else. Certainly not something that we would want to say to anybody else. But we have to be aware of the fact that sometimes our passive actions could actually be saying that without our knowledge. And so we have to be mindful of that idea of recognition. Recognition in Hebrew is the word lehakir, heker. And we often say, for example, we say, what does it mean to thank somebody? We call it what? Hakarat hatov, right? Hakarat hatov means recognizing the good that somebody else did for us. If someone does something good and we ignore it, what statement does that make? What message are we sending back to that person? What you did for me really isn't so important. That doesn't need to be acknowledged. I could have done that myself. I don't need you. I'm okay on my own. That's kfui tova. That's denying the good that someone else gave. As opposed to acknowledging somebody and saying, thank you so much for what you did. I couldn't have done it without you. That's not only recognizing the good that they did, but it's also recognizing the good that's in that person, that person was there for a purpose and helped you out and did something good for you. And that is a hallmark of what Judaism is. We are a nation that is all about recognizing the other, seeing other people, that they're there, that they're important, and giving them their acknowledgement for their talents, for their efforts, for their work, for the kindness, for the goodness that they give, and seeing the good inside of everybody. Where that comes from is a basic idea that every human being is created b'tselem Elohim. Every human being is created in the image of God. That's why the Torah has to start with creation, with the creation of human beings. Because if I know that every human being was created by God, I don't question God. And I understand that God creates everybody for a particular purpose and endows them with talents, with gifts, and with a responsibility to bring something to the world that nobody else can bring. So if that's something that's in my head, and I'm thinking about that, and I'm mindful of it, and I'm conscious of it in every interaction that I have, in every person that I see, that I look and I see a human being, and I see someone who was created by God, who has a neshama, who has a soul, who has a spirit, who has importance, who has talents, who has something to offer, then it's incumbent upon me to recognize that. It's incumbent upon me to feel as though I'm in the presence of greatness. I'm in the presence of holiness, that every human being exudes some level of importance and holiness to bring to our collective. And so then you don't ask questions like, why is that person here, or they don't belong, or things like that. You would say, no, how amazing it is that we have a new person here who's going to bring their tselem Elohim to our group. That's not something that we had before. And that's something that we want to acknowledge and that we want to go ahead and recognize. Thoughts or comments about that, maybe stories even that you want to share. So Norma, hopefully it didn't embarrass you too much. And we recognized you as part of our group. And now you're welcome to come back every single time and bring more of your friends, because when you're not here, we're missing something that we could have had without that. Yeah. The quote from Pirkei Avot. The quote is Yihi kavod havercha, that the honor of your fellow man should be haviv, should be as beloved to you, keshelach, as your own honor. Which means that if you recognize, so it's a good point now that you had me rethink about, which is you have to also love yourself. You have to also have self-esteem. You have to also recognize that you yourself are created in the image of God and you have talents. Right. So if you don't recognize that in yourself and you don't see that in who you are, then it's going to be very hard for you to recognize it in the other. So yes, it comes starting first with a sense of self-esteem. Yeah. Exactly.
feel like this is advice that should be given to high schoolers or eighth graders because it's I feel like even when you're saying it, it all makes sense. And
Yes.
It sounds like
Yes.
common sense, but really until somebody actually says it to you, people really do just like they don't even acknowledge or notice anything.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah, we all have that. We all go through it, and we go through it at every age. Certainly the teenage years are even more trying and challenging, where as a teenager, you're always worried about what other people think about you, and you're always worried about being cool, and you always want to be within a certain group of people. And so everything becomes very cliquey, right? That's the concept of having cliques, is that we belong to this group, and this group has a certain personality and identity to it, and other people who don't fit that mold are not welcome into this group that shares that identity. And so what you really have to ask yourself the question is, how are we forming our groups? What is our identity? If our identities are superficial, if our identities are shallow, if the way we're defining and grouping people together is based on things that we don't hold to be true values and truly important, then we're Xing out people who have a lot to offer us, who have great Tselem Elokim, who we would want to interact with for silly reasons, for nonsensical reasons. And those are not the same reasons that we would want to be X'd out of other groups as well, right? So it starts with a feeling of the self. I am very important, right? I was created by Hashem. I recognize the talents and gifts that I have and what I can offer other people. But I also recognize that once I have that, that means everybody else has that. And the more I can interact with people on that level, the more I can partner, the more I can bring more people in, the more exponential I would grow in terms of the good that I could bring into my life. This is why we talk about marriage, right? We talk about people getting together. Mike, if you think about it for a minute, I hate to say it this way, but marriage almost doesn't make sense if you think about it. Why do I say it almost doesn't make sense? Because a person, if they're just about gratifying themselves, if they're just about quote unquote enjoying their life, it's so much easier to enjoy your life when you're not burdened by a spouse and children and family. Like, I can travel wherever I want, I can go wherever I want, I can be whoever I want, and I can just be myself, right? And Judaism doesn't believe in that, because Judaism says you on your own are Tselem Elokim, true, but you would want to interact and create as much more Tselem Elokim as you possibly could, which means for me to connect with a lifelong spouse who completes my Tselem Elokim together, and to then produce children who bring more Tselem Elokim into the world and more talent and more holiness into the world with every single child that I create. That's the infinite good that I'm able to bring, not just for myself, but for everybody else. So to not get married from that perspective, like a philosophical idea of I just want to be myself and enjoy, is in the eyes of the Torah very selfish, right? It's basically saying I live for me and everybody else can, take a hike, right? And so you have to recognize yourself, you have to recognize your Tselem Elokim, and then you can go ahead and recognize the other and see that in other people. I'll give you another manifestation of this, which comes about in if my thing will cooperate here, maybe, there we go. So we're commanded, and Linda, you brought it up before, right? To love others as we love ourselves, which is certainly perhaps the Torah pasuk that best connects to this line that we started with. And from there, we have a mitzvah to love every member of the Jewish people, right? A mitzvah to love everybody. And the Rambam records it, he brings it down as a mitzvah to love every member of the Jewish people, no matter what. And the question then gets asked is, how do we really love every member of the Jewish people? How do we love everybody? Not everybody's so great, right? You have a lot of different types of people amongst the Jewish nation. You have some people who are righteous, some people who are not so righteous, some people observant, some people not observant, some people, every shade and color, in between that. So how do I really bring myself, especially when I have such differences with other people, to really appreciate and acknowledge and love every member of the Jewish people? To the extent, by the way, that there was a very famous rabbi, I don't know if anybody's ever visited his grave or heard of him, the Arizal. Anybody ever heard of that? Yeah, you've heard that name before? The Arizal was a Jewish mystic in the 16th century. He lived up north in Tzfat. So if anybody goes to Israel and you go to Tzfat up north, you've been there before, you can visit his grave. There's a special mikveh that he was said to have dipped in. He was a very, very holy person. And basically, he's the father of what we like to call Lurianic Kabbalah, a certain brand of mysticism that is widely popular in the Jewish world today and practiced by many, many millions, hundreds of thousands of people. So the Arizal wrote that it is an obligation before a person prays to say to themselves, I hereby accept upon myself the mitzvah to love every single member of the Jewish people in accordance with the pasuk ve'ahavta l're'acha kamocha, and that my tefillot are connecting to the tefillot of all members of the Jewish people, no matter who they are and where they live. That was an idea that the Arizal said. Before you can come and pray to Hashem and connect with God as your Tzelem Elokim, you have to acknowledge the fact that you have a responsibility to love every member of the Jewish people, that you have a responsibility to connect to the other. And I think this was something that he was trying to save us from, a pitfall he was trying to save us from. Because when a person prays, you can get into your own self, right? What do I need? What am I missing? What is my biggest need, right? A person is, God forbid, sick. Our business is not going well. I want to have a child. My kid needs to get married. Whatever the challenge that you're going in, you can have tunnel vision very easily in your prayer, all about yourself. Now, of course, tefillah is about your connection with Hashem and asking for those things. But I think the Arizal had us say, before you start praying, take a step back and understand that your prayer happens within a larger context of the entire Jewish people. And if you don't love every single member of the Jewish people, if you're not in tune with others, then your tefillah is going to fall on deaf ears. Your tefillah is not as meaningful as it probably could be, because God wants us to connect with others. He wants us to be in a group setting, right? That's why we make it such an important idea to pray with a minyan, to pray together with other people. Even though I'm praying silently, I'm looking around and saying, I'm making a connection. Even as I'm having my own personal prayer with God, I'm having a connection with all of these other people around. We're sharing similar values. We're expressing the same things. We're praying to the same God. And even though all of them might be a little bit different than me, they lead their lives a little differently, they observe a little differently, we can all come together under that idea of we're all B'Tselem Elokim, we're all in the image of God, and we could all go ahead and pray. So the Arizal had us make sure to do that before we pray. Absolutely. I think they say if you pray for somebody else, the quote is that if you pray for somebody else for the very thing that you need, then Hashem answers you first, which basically means if you could put your own issues aside, right? Let's say a person is having, God forbid, a child who's struggling to get married, but they have a friend who also has a child who's struggling to get married, and they pray for their friend's child in a genuine way, not like because, I'll just pray for them and then God will answer. But they pray in a genuine way. I feel terrible. My friend just opened up to me and cried to me about the challenges that are going on with her son or her daughter, and I feel terrible about it. I'm going to pray for them. And you do that in a genuine way, leaving aside your needs and your struggles for whatever it is to be. That is a very high level. Then Hashem says, wow, if you could pray in that way about somebody else, then you deserve to have that thing yourself as well.
That's the same idea when you say
Absolutely.
feel better, you say within all this.
Has to be within the context. You cannot separate yourself from everybody else. This goes back to our class we gave a number of weeks ago about community. If you're isolated from everybody, then you're missing a fundamental point of what Judaism calls you to bring to the world. You're missing the point of what Judaism asks you to do, which is to not just be about yourself, but to grow yourself within the context of everybody else. But I heard a very nice mashal, a very nice parable about how do we do this? Because practically it all sounds nice and good, like Linda said before, it all makes a lot of sense. But to really put it into practice, it's very, very hard because there's so many different people and there's so many people I don't get along with, so many people I disagree with. How do I really come to love all of them? Okay, hold that thought. Yeah, make sure we come back. Remind me to come back. So the mashal went like this. The mashal said, think about a person's body. Think about all of the different parts of the human body, right? Every part of the human body is really important, correct? But if somebody goes to hit you over the head, what's going to be your reaction? What are you going to do? You're going to take your arms to cover your head, but then your arms are going to get hit, right? Your arms will get cut. Why doesn't anybody think about that? Because what are you essentially saying to yourself? My head is more important, right? I'm prioritizing. I know that my head is a very sensitive part of my body, cannot really get damaged. My arms can handle a little bit more trauma, whatever it might be. I'm willing to sacrifice my hands to get hit, in order to protect another part of the body, which is that important, right? And we do this with a lot of different things. That being said, can a person die from something that happens in their arms? Of course they can, right? Of course they can. The arms are a very important part of a person's body. And if they're maimed or something, God forbid, happens, that could cause a person to lose their entire life. So it's not that, in other words, what the mashal, the nimshal over here is that we have a lot of different parts of the Jewish people. And some parts are, so to speak, more important than others. They're on a higher level, right? We have the righteous people that are like the head. They're on the higher level. We have other people who are maybe not on that higher level. They're like the hands. But in the end of the day, even though sometimes we cover the hands to protect the head, you still need the hands. Without those hands, you're deficient. You're not a complete person. You're not a complete people, right? So the idea is to put into our mind that we as Am Yisrael collectively are like a body. And yes, there might be some people more important than others, some people that bring a little bit more to the table than other people do. But nevertheless, without those people who even don't bring as much to the table, we could be threatened as a people. We could be in sakana if they didn't exist, if they didn't bring whatever it is that they do bring to the table, whatever Hashem created them for. If they're not there, then we're in danger and we're losing out. And that's where your Ahavat Yisrael comes from. That's how you have people like Chacham Ovadia Yosef Alav Shalom. We used to see him, we used to pray with him, and used to see a couple come to get a beracha from him on the day of their wedding. And several times it happened. I remember one particular instance that it happened where like a couple came in and the guy had a ponytail and the girl had like a tattoo on her shoulder. And like the Gabbai said, like, you have to like cover up a little bit, whatever it is, but she couldn't even do it. She didn't have anything that could cover herself up. She had a tattoo, this and that. And you saw them go into Chacham Ovadia, the greatest rabbi of the generation, gave them a beracha, wished them well, sat with the couple and talked to them. This was their important day. And he treated them with that level of respect. He saw in them that Selim Elokim. And despite whatever things they may have done or will be doing or whatnot, he saw them as an integral part of Am Yisrael. And they're bringing something that other people cannot bring, whatever that might be. And without them, we're under threat. Without every member, something is ailing the Jewish people as a whole.
I was gonna say, like, one of the ways is really to wear those like rosy colored glasses and just find positive points about every single person and just focus on those.
100%.
Everything else.
And it sounds, sometimes to us, it sounds a little, for lack of a better term, te'il, like, oh, like what he's saying, like in the end of the day, look, in the end of the day, we do know that there are some people who need a lot to work on themselves, that there is more to be desired. And it's okay. You could still advance the cause. You could still educate and grow people and see the things that they're missing in the hopes of filling that in for them while still appreciating what they bring to the table. In other words, I'm not asking us to put on blinders to a certain degree. Like you said, the what was the phrase you said? Rose-colored glasses, right? Yeah. So yeah, you want to see some of those things. In other words, I don't even look at it that way. To me, that like says, I'm going to pretend that their negatives don't exist and only focus on their positive. Right. Right. At the same time, I don't think we should dismiss people's negatives. It's important to understand that every human being struggles with certain things. But it's our job to try and help that person to grow, to be a positive influence on them, to contribute in whatever way we can towards that person's growth. So appreciating the positives of a person, and then also understanding that the negatives are part of that journey, are part of that growth, because no human being is totally and 100% positive and good, right? Everybody has those things. So we understand that about ourselves, and then we can understand that about other people. And if we do, I think then we can understand, hey, I can have a relationship with this person. I can have an interaction and a dialogue with them. I can treat them with dignity and respect and bring them in because I know that the positives they have to offer will be good. And I can maybe help them and work on their negatives, and maybe they can help me and work on my negatives as well. Julie, you wanted to?
So I was going to say that I think humans are naturally judgmental people. And I think that that's where our bias comes from. Immediately, anyone who's not different from us. But I know it's just something that I try to keep in mind, and I fail at it all the time, but that if you kind of look at everyone as everyone is there to teach you something, and whether it's good, I have friends who do amazing things and I go, they're teaching me how to be a good friend. And if someone frustrates me, I need to learn to work on my patience. And if someone disgusts me, it's, wait, what's going on inside, and turn it. And I know maybe that sounds selfish, but I think that's something we can learn with our children. If you have one child who just gets to you, it's not so much their problem, it's why is that triggering you? And if you see that each person is put on earth, it could be micro or macro, like it could be your child or it could be a nation, it could be a country, as big as that. But everyone is put here to refine each and every one of us. And we, like you said, we need to learn from each other, but not only learn good or bad, maybe reflect.
Yeah, that was the word I was going to respond to you with. Yeah, the idea of reflection is so important, right? So whatever is going on in your life, to transition it back to yourself. Again, not in a selfish way, like you said, but saying, what could I do in this situation to improve myself? Or what can I do in this situation to help the other individual, right? But always looking at it from the standpoint of how I'm going to respond in the way that I would want if I was on the other side of the table, right? So if I was in that other person's shoes, how would I want me to respond to me? Does that make sense what I'm trying to say? Right? So if you're having a conflict with somebody and you're trying to figure out, how do I handle this situation? How do I handle my child? How do I handle a neighbor? How do I handle them? Think about, well, what would it be if I was on the opposite side? How would I want that to be handled towards me? And then use that as the barometer for how you're going to act, right? And usually when that happens, that will have a person say, well, I wouldn't want someone to say that to me. I wouldn't want someone to do that to me. That doesn't seem like it's right representing my tzelem Elokim in the way that I would want it to be. So having that foundation and that reflection and that understanding, I think is really the key to dealing with our interactions. And you brought up a point that is also a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Ezehu Hacham, who's someone who's wise, Halomed Mikol Adam, someone who learns from all people. And you can learn from all people in a lot of different ways. You can learn from the things they say. You can learn from the things they do. You can learn from the interactions that you have. You can learn from their mistakes. You can learn from how they acted towards you. So if you're taking every single experience in life as something that is a growth opportunity, something that I can learn from, either about myself, about others, about the other person to better help them, and you're always looking at it from that perspective of growth, then a person is going to have much more positive, much more healthy, much more inspiring interactions with other people. And what you then see is people start to treat you that way as well. Because we always know that whatever you put out to others is what you're going to get back from others. So somebody who's mechabed other people, if you give honor and respect to that people, those people will say, I wouldn't want to treat them that way. They treat me with such respect and dignity, even when we're disagreeing with each other. I certainly would want to give them that benefit as well, right back to them. Yeah, Jenny.
So it tapped on to what you were saying before about guarding your head with your hands. I heard something once that you don't notice your pinky finger, right? Like you go back, you don't even think about it. But if you even get a paper cut on your pinky finger, you feel it throughout your day.
Exactly.
So it's that same idea.
Yeah.
Where everything really has a very important part, and you just have to recognize that for each
100%. We don't know how every other person fits into that web of the Jewish people and of us as a nation. But we do know that when someone's suffering wherever they are, it means that we as a collective body are going through something that we need to go ahead and try and fix, and we need to work on, and we need to be there to go ahead and assist it. So yeah, when something's going wrong, when something's off, it could be the silliest thing, things that we never even heard of, names that we never even heard of. I remember Rabbi Tobias gave a speech last summer at the very end when he was talking about his voice issue that he had. He said there was a part of his voice that he had never even heard of, but basically it was moved like that, he was going to die. Like it was like a wild thing. Parts of our body that we never even heard of, that we don't even know that they're consistently functioning. And then when they come off a tweak, all of a sudden we're in danger, right? And that's the way we should think about the human being as all human beings, right? And all of our nation, so to speak, as a whole. I want to transition this into another very important conversation. And I think that so far we've spoken very abstractly, a lot of speaking about interacting with each other, acknowledging each other, interacting with each other. And these are simple interactions that if we're just mindful of can really be very, very uplifting in our lives and uplift other people. But sometimes they're a little bit abstract. I want to try and give maybe something a little bit more practical, and especially with the summer coming, maybe something that we can keep in mind for ourselves. And this goes to another statement that's made just a few Mishnayot later, which is similarly structured, but has a little tweak to it. The statement goes, where is it? I lost it. Yeah. The statement is made by a different rabbi. His name was Rabbi Yosef. He says, "Yihi mamon havercha haviv alecha keshelach." Let other people's property, possessions, and money be as beloved to you as your own. Now, this is a little bit more concrete, and I think a little bit of an easier concept for people to grasp and maybe even an easier idea to apply. That we should treat other people's possessions, other people's space and maybe bodies as well, and their property with the type of respect that we would want for our own, right? This is something that, going back to whoever brought up teenagers, right? I think it was Linda. I try to speak to them about this all the time. Teenagers, for some reason, they're just always taking each other's stuff. They're always playing around with each other's stuff. I don't know what it is when that stops. Because like as adults, I don't know. I don't feel the need to like grab onto somebody else's bag. But for some reason, teenagers just always have to take each other's bags all the time. And I can't figure out what the obsession is with confiscating your classmate's bag and hiding it somewhere. Like, I don't know, I guess they're just bored. I mean, we have to do something a little bit better, but I don't know, am I making this up? Because I think this is a pretty, yeah, I've seen videos. They're just taking stuff from each other and pulling, yeah, bags specifically, but also they're pulling jewelry off each other. They're playing with each other's hair. I don't know, it's pretty wild. I don't know what's going on over there, but it's pretty wild. And I try to tell them, they get happy about it, but it really agitates people. They really, you see the level of agitation that people have when other people, even though they know they're joking with them, it just bothers them so much. And that's because our property, our possessions are really, in a way, an extension of ourselves. Think about the following example. I don't know if it's happened to anybody. I'm sure it has. You wake up in the morning, you go into your car, you sit in the driver's seat, and you notice that the glove compartment is open, and the sunglass case on top is open, and there's papers and stuff ruffled, and you know somebody has been in your car the night before and was looking for something, and maybe they didn't take anything. In my case, it's happened to us several times, not here in Deal, but in Brooklyn, it happened to us several times, and we didn't have sunglasses in the case, and we didn't have anything in the glove compartment. So thankfully, nothing was taken, but you know someone else has been in that car the night before you got into it. And the feeling, well, it's violation. You feel worse about that than you do if they would have even taken anything. I don't even care if they actually got my sunglasses or something like that. It's replaceable. I feel like somebody foreign has been in my space, has been where this is me, right? My car and is an extension of myself, right? And when somebody's been in it, they've broken down that barrier, I feel violated, right? When someone else takes their bag or put their hands in someone else's bag, that's a violation of who they are, of their person, of their humanity, right? And so we attach a lot of significance and a lot of meaning to our possessions, to our property, to our space, to where I am, right? And as a result, when somebody else crosses that line, it's a really, really big hit to us. It's a really big violation. And that's what Rabbi Yosef over here is saying, is that a person, I think what he's trying to say is the first step to, I think, getting to the point with these very lofty ideas of honoring a person because of Tselem Elokim and things like that. You know what the first step might be? Is just to honor their possessions, to be mindful of their space and the extension of themselves, which is their property, right? And to be careful about how we treat other people's property. I'll give a couple of examples, right? It's always very disturbing to me that people can go to the beach, let's say, and set up shop and then just leave a mess there, right? I mean, the statement that you're making at that point is, this area doesn't matter to me, or even allow their mess to go on to other people, right? They're letting their stuff blow in other people's areas, right? You're violating our space. You're violating our property. You're violating where people are going to go ahead and walk. This is something that belongs to everybody. So when you're in a spot and then you leave a mess behind, I think it says a lot about you, and it doesn't say good things about the type of person that you might be. When a person is online at a crowded supermarket and is pushing their way in, or leaves their cart, right at the entrance to the aisle so that nobody can get in, right? That's saying something about what you think of everybody else and about who you are. You're basically saying, this is my domain. This supermarket belongs to me. I can treat it however I want, and I can do whatever I want. Yeah. I understand. I knew what I was saying when I was saying it, right?
We're the ones that move the cards out of the way.
Right. But I do think it's important sometimes that I've been on both sides of the coin. I lived in my whole life in Brooklyn, and now I'm a Deal guy, and I see I never understood, to be fully honest with you. Yeah, we're already at it. It's May 15th, right? We're already at that feeling. But I never really understood the dynamic as it was. Like as a Brooklyn person, like, why is everybody so like, we're coming, we're spending our money, we're doing our thing, like deal with it. Like, what's the big deal? Right? Then you're on the other side of the coin and you understand, hey, this is my lifestyle. This is where I live all year long. And there's a certain way of going about treating it and stuff like that. I do think it's important for us to show people the ropes, to speak to people about it, and to be role models for that, because I do find that sometimes deal people all of a sudden flip a switch. And even we become like a little bit like, hey, if the Brooklyn people are doing it, so, I got to compete. I got to do what I got to do. So I've seen myself even in Uri's during the summer, and I'm banging into people and we're trying to get in line and I'm just kidding, because you're just like, all right, I got to survive to a certain extent. But just because you're trying to survive doesn't mean that you should join in on what is not meant to be the case. So I do think that a starting point for us treating other people with dignity, seeing that Tselem Elokim in people, might be to start with their possessions, might be to start with their time and space, how we conduct ourselves in a crowded line, how we treat the store vendors and speaking to them properly, and understanding that just because I spend money here doesn't mean that the other person is not a human being, right? That they should be able to take whatever kind of abuse and other things that I throw at them simply because my money does the trick for me, right? That's not to say they won't take your money, but it doesn't mean that it shouldn't come with a level of dignity and respect about how we treat the store vendors, how we treat staff, how we treat waiters, understanding that they're going to be under a lot of pressure. There's going to be a lot of people. And so if it's a couple of extra minutes to get my drink or to get my meal, understanding and seeing as what would it be like if I was on the other side of that coin, and recognizing, by the way, that it's not just Jewish people, but it's all human beings are created with that Tselem Elohim, and having that mindfulness, that consciousness, and that sensitivity towards them, I think changes up the entire ballgame. I think we'll feel better about ourselves. We'll see our interactions be positive and healthy. We'll see those around us want to be with us, spend more time, and we'll feel connected to other people. I want to leave you with just one story about the idea of property. There was a story about a rabbi, his name was Mordechai, and he one time witnessed how in the yeshiva that there was, somebody stole a cup, a very expensive cup, and they couldn't find out who it was. And it was hidden and nobody knew who it was, and it was causing a lot of disturbance. And one time he saw a particular student do netilat yadayim, and he didn't have a towel. So he went over and he took his friend's robe and he wiped his hands on his friend's robe. And he said, that's the guy who took the cup. And everyone looked at him and said, how do you know he took the cup? He said, if he could treat his friend's garment like that, if he has such callousness towards his friend's clothing that he can, without permission, wipe his hands on someone else, that's somebody who has the character of somebody who can steal the cup. And they found out that the guy did, in fact, take the cup. They investigated the matter and they saw that he did. Now, I'm not saying go over and start accusing everybody of everything, but the point is well taken. What happens is we start to desensitize ourselves. If a person starts to be a little bit casual with someone else's property or money or time and space, all of a sudden you say, oh, well, what's the big deal? It's just a minute, right? It's just 2 minutes, right? I used to say this to people who block driveways in Brooklyn all the time. They blocked your driveway, but I'm just here for a minute. No. It doesn't work that way. You can never block the driveway. It doesn't work that way, because 1 minute, now it's 1 minute. And by the way, you as the blocker could say, well, it's only 1 minute. One time it's a minute, the next time it's 5 minutes, the next time it's 10 minutes. And then you wonder how people could just park their car in the driveway for an hour and leave and not do anything, right? How could that happen? It doesn't happen overnight. They don't just become habitual 1 hour driveway blockers. It starts with, I'm serious, it starts with 30 seconds, it starts with a minute, and then they get, oh, but it's just a minute, but it's just this, but it's just that. And then eventually you start to become a perpetual violator of someone else's time and space, right? The way you drive, the way you interact with other people. The number one thing, I used to tell this to men have this issue. Your father-in-law, he went wild with me on it. Somebody who blocked someone else's driveway because he needed to say Kaddish in shul. because he needed to say Kaddish in shul. He said, I need to say Kaddish. So he blocked the person's driveway to go say Kaddish. I mean, I told him, I don't think, he said, but I have to say Kaddish for my father, for my mother, whatever the situation was. And Danny said to him, he said, I don't think there's a more disrespectful thing you could do to your father or mother's legacy than what you just did, than actually blocking the person's driveway and treating someone else with disrespect. That's not the kind of Kaddish that we want. And he's 100% right. I told him, I said, I totally agree with what you said. It's a powerful lesson, and maybe not one that everybody wants to hear, but it's the truth. You have to think about that for a second. You have to say to yourself, I'm going to say Kaddish to my father, but I'm going to harm another person in the process of doing that. I'm going to leave my car in the street and make sure, and someone else is late to work and they got docked and they got in trouble or something like that. It's not logical. We wouldn't want anybody else to treat that. If I was on the opposite end of that, I would be furious. We would be fuming, but because we're on the other side of it, we say, oh, but it's just this. Oh, but it's just that. And that's us not being sensitive to kavod of other people, to the monetary possessions of other people, to their time, to their space, to their property. These are all things that I think are very practical. And if we do that a little bit more, even under the harshest of circumstances, like the one that we're about to get into, where you have your instinct is to get angry and to get upset and to join in, if you're able to step back and maintain your dignity, your tzelem elokim, that self that we started with, and treat others, I think other people will respond in kind. And so hopefully we can improve on that. Hopefully that will be a message that resonates with us and with our children, and hopefully give us a very enjoyable, very pleasant, and very welcoming type of summer. Questions, comments? Okay. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen. Amen. Have a great day, everybody.